Hello everyone, welcome to 1045 Engineering. We are here with yet another video. So today's topic is constructors in Java. So let's start. So first, the topics that we are going to cover are constructor definitions, the characteristics of constructor, types of constructors, constructor overloading, and constructor chaining. So let's jump into it, right? So by definition, constructor is a special method that is used to initialize objects, right? You can initialize internal members of the class. Plus, it has no return types. The name is same as the class, and it gets invoked automatically when an object is created. Okay, so let's look at the code example and let's start with it. Okay, let's create a constructor class. We'll call it constructor example. Okay, public static void main. Will create our main method first. Args. Okay, let's print. Oops. System dot out dot println, right? Let's print okay. Let's run it. If it's working fine, okay, we are able to run. Right now, first we'll look at a normal constructor and how do we actually define it, right? So let's say we have a variable. Okay, let's call it private string name. Okay, now imagine that you do not define any constructor. First let's define a constructor, but first let's start with the constructor. Okay, so we'll say constructor to initialize name, right? So we can say public, and then constructor is supposed to is a method that is supposed to have the same name as the class name. So same constructor example, and we can say name is equal to, let's initialize it with something, YouTube. Okay, now if I run this program as of now, it won't do anything. It's just printing 1045 engineering. But when we create an object of this class constructor example, this constructor will get invoked and the value for the name will get initialized to YouTube. So let's do object creation, constructor example, object is equal to new constructor example. Okay, then we can system dot out dot println object dot name. Okay, let's run and we can see YouTube. Now let's go back. We see it's the same name as the class name. It gets invoked automatically when the object is created. Okay, because nowhere we are calling this method, it's directly getting invoked when the new object is being created. Okay, now one more thing is, imagine that you do not define any constructor. Java provides a default constructor. So this is also a default constructor once you define it. So since there is only one constructor, this will be a default constructor. But in case you do not provide this constructor at all, Java will write a constructor that looks something like this. Wait one second. That will look something like this. Public constructor example and blank. That's all. Okay, and actually super to be calling the upper constructor in this case if the class was creating instance from another class. Okay, or if the class was extending another class, sorry. Now since we have defined our constructor, we do not get the default constructor. Let's do it this way. Since we have defined a default constructor, this constructor is no longer required. This will be our only default constructor in this case. Okay, and we have initialized the value for a name. The name gets printed. Now let's go next. So what are the types of constructor? Again, there is one is default constructor which has no parameters, and the other one is a constructor which has parameters. Okay, let's understand it. Okay, so this one was default constructor where we were initializing the name, we got YouTube, but when we are calling it we did not pass any parameters, right? Now let's give a parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor, it's not that different, it's the same syntax, only thing is that we'll be passing parameters. So constructor example, now we'll get some name, string name, and we'll use this name to initialize our name. This dot name is equal to name. Okay, now we need to call this constructor as well. Right now this constructor is not being called, only the default constructor, this one is being called. I'll call also the default constructor. Okay, now let's call the new constructor. We'll say we'll create another object, constructor object2 is equal to new constructor, we'll pass some name, channel. Okay, and that's it. Let's run this. Now wait, we passed it, but we need to print the value system.out.println object2.name. Okay, let's run, and we can see channel. So what happened when we created a object by passing the parameters, the parameterized constructor got called, right? Because the constructor will always get called when you create a new object. Okay, so parameterized constructor got called, it initialized the name with the new name channel that we passed, and we can see channel for name3. So this is parameterized constructor. So this would be the default constructor or the non-parameterized constructor, and this is the parameterized constructor. Default constructor and non-parameterized constructor. Okay, now next is understanding constructor overloading. So constructor overloading is same as method overloading, where we have multiple methods or constructors with different parameter lists, right? So in this case also, if you see, this is actually constructor overloading already, but let's understand this with another example. Okay, we'll declare a few variables, we'll call them private int length and private int width. Okay, now let's create another object. Okay, so I'll say public constructor example, and we'll pass what should we pass? We want to showcase overloading, right? So we'll say constructor example. First is I can change the variable types. So now I can say int side, this dot length is equal to side, and this dot width is equal to side as well. Okay, now if you see, they have the same names, only the type of the parameter has changed. So now if I create another object, constructor example object3 is equal to new constructor example, now I'll pass side, that will be 10, and let's print the side, system.out.println object3.length. Okay, since length and width both of them have been given the same sides, so we can see 10 is assigned to length, 10 was assigned to side from side is assigned to length and width, and we can see here. Now one more thing we can do is, if we create another constructor now, so this is already an example of constructor overloading. It only means, like in case of method overloading, you have the same names for the methods, only the parameters are changing. In this one no parameters, in this a string type parameter, in this is int, in the next one will change the length of parameters, so multiple parameters. So we can say let's call it constructor overloading. All of these examples are for constructor overloading now. So constructor example will pass int length, int width, then this dot length is equal to length, this dot width is equal to width. Okay, now let's create another object. So we can say constructor example object 4 is equal to new constructor example. Okay, now we have to pass two sides, so we'll pass 20 and 30. We'll print system.out.println object 4 dot length. We are printing the length again from our last constructor, that is with two lengths, two integers, 20 and 30. Okay, let's run it. So we can see 20 is the length for the fourth object that got assigned with this constructor. Now the major thing to notice is we have constructor example, constructor example, constructor example and constructor example, and all of these are performing different things. This is constructor overloading, right? Same method name, but the parameters are changing. Okay, now let's go to the next part, that is constructor chaining. That is where we can call one constructor from another constructor within the same class. Okay, let's see how we can do this. So one example is let's say we have this constructor length and width. Okay, let me take this one out. This constructor, let's delete it. This constructor is no longer available. Okay, similarly this method will no longer work, so let's delete this. Okay, now we have a constructor that is initializing a length and width. I will create another constructor. I'll say public constructor example int side. Okay, now I want to call this constructor, so I can call this constructor from this constructor alone, and I can say let's say this, that is giving us the reference that we are calling the object of this class, this, and then pass the values. First is side, the other one is, it's expecting a width as well, right? So let's give a width of, or let's give a side of 50 and width of side. Okay, now if you see, I'll create another object, system.out.println, not println first, constructor example object 5 is equal to new constructor example, and I'll pass only one value, that will be 100 for the side. Okay, now system.out.println will print object 5 dot width. Okay, now if you see, I have passed only 100, that is the side for this one, or let's print the length only, length. Okay, I have passed 100, that is passed to this constructor which is expecting only one parameter of integer type. So this one is calling this parameter of integer type. From this one I am calling the other constructor that is expecting two parameters, both of type integer, that is this constructor, by using this this keyword directly. So now this one will call this constructor, and it has two parameter, length and width. So length we are passing 50 separately, side was already given as 100, and length will get the value 50, side will get width will get the value 100, right? Let's print the width also for the last one, system.out.println object 5 dot width. Okay, let's run it. 50 and 100. This is constructor chaining, when you call another constructor from other constructor of the same class. This is constructor chaining. Okay, so that's all from this session on constructors in Java. For anything, please let me know in the comment section. If you have any doubt, I'll be happy to engage with you all in the comment section. In the end, please like, share and subscribe. Thank you.